Hello, welcome to B3 In Depth, ladies and gentlemen of whatever gender you prefer. My name is Johannes Grenzfurtner, long and strange Austrian name. I'm the host of B3 In Depth, and I do interviews with interesting personalities from all around the globe. And it is a pleasure to welcome Eric McEver to our little online conversation. Interesting fact is that I'm sitting in Vienna, he's sitting in Vienna, just like 2 kilometers away from me, but it's just like better. Like people are used to the whole thing of like having two screens and all that stuff. It would be weird for people that we would sit in one room and then we would probably have to wear masks or something like that. Who knows?
Yeah, well, and I'm trying to figure out the symbolism of where we're sitting because it's like you're in your flat. It's just kind of like it's like and I went to which I've had now had many lovely meals, and it's very nice sort of normal housing, and this is museums quarter. So this, as I
Yes.
understand it, this used to be the Imperial Horse Stables,
It it
which
was it was like 100 years ago, like even longer than 100 years ago, like 120, 30 years ago, up until I guess the First World War.
yeah, and
And yeah, and now it is an art center. And
so
so the backstory is that I'm part of Monochrome. You can actually see it in my name description. And Monochrome is an art and technology collective, and we also do films. And we have offices at the museum's quarter, and it is possible for us to invite resident artists to Vienna. And Eric is currently our resident artist. And Eric is actually from Oklahoma, so from the US. But for the last 10 years, he lived in Japan. And we'll talk about all of this
yeah.
in our conversation. But first of all, it's great to have you. And let's start like with the very beginnings. So I heard that you are an enormous fan of dinosaurs, which makes a lot of sense because, as far as I know, there is a lot of like excavation going on in Oklahoma and the flyover states, as the West Coasters and East Coasters call them, and there are a lot of dinosaur bones and stuff like that going on. Was that like part of your fascination with dinosaurs as well?
Well, so first of all, let me just back up and say thank you for having me here. This has been an absolute delight and an honor to be here and be serving an artist in residence. So, just before we get into it more, just thank you and thank you everyone who's listening to this. I hope to make it interesting and enlightening and maybe a little bit stimulating. Now, it's really interesting you ask the dinosaur question the way you do. Because so yes, and basically everything important in my life can be traced back to dinosaurs. And I realize that sounds ridiculous, but I think as the conversation unfolds, you'll realize just how shockingly true it actually is. It's interesting you ask about if whether that fascination had anything to do with Oklahoma, because so it's true that there is actually a lot of excavation now, and actually near my childhood home, there's a very large, very nice museum with a lot of research going on. But when I was growing up, there was actually very little, and what I didn't know is that actually a lot of the fossils that made up the collections in that museum were in storage beneath the football stadium because there was no money for it. So there had been research, but it was actually not a place where a lot of paleontology was being done. And now this speaks to a larger issue of I had a very safe, very happy, but at the time I thought very boring childhood. I thought Oklahoma was a place where nothing of importance happened, nothing interesting happened. And I think the fascination with dinosaurs, it really, in some, in some form or fashion, it was a portal to a larger, more exciting world. It's like I was in this very, like what I perceived as a safe but boring place, and dinosaurs were sort of a ticket for my imagination to travel, and then eventually to literally travel because what I ended up sort of forcing upon my parents was that any and all family vacations we went on, there had to be some sort of dinosaur component. So we would always go to the Natural History Museum or the dig site. And so I think that does. I mean, if I'm going to try to psychoanalyze myself, which is never a healthy thing to do, I think that may connect to some later things because even from an early age, there was just dinosaurs were an impetus to get out and sort of reach into a wider world and see what was there.
Which I mean, it's not a wider world, but also like eons in the past. So there's
Yeah,
like not only the space, but also the time is a very interesting component because if there's one thing we can see traces of dinosaurs still around in birds and
yeah.
evolutionary like paths. But I mean, if there is one thing that we cannot really see anymore, it's a real dinosaur. And I mean, Steven Spielberg and those guys played with all of that stuff. So, were you kind of like
Yeah.
inspired by films like that, like Jurassic Park, or was there like an artistic or like pop cultural element to your fascination?
Yeah, no, I have I mean, I have an interesting relationship with Jurassic Park because I was a dinosaur. I mean, I was an avid dinosaur enthusiast well before that film came out. I mean, I was 7 when it came out, and by that point, I already had all kinds of opinions and all sorts of like frustrations with how they executed things. And I, so at the at the ripe old age of 7, I was deeply frustrated with Jurassic Park because it felt like suddenly all of my peers and and the adults in my life who were kind of like, oh, that's cute, dinosaurs, like suddenly, oh, dinosaurs are cool, and they thought they knew dinosaurs, and I was just kind of like, you pretentious posers, you have no idea what a wide and beautiful world that there is, that this is only scratching the surface. No,
So
I've
you
since,
were
I've since softened a bit. I mean, Jurassic Park is an excellent film.
no,
But
it's really great. Like
yeah,
you look at it like early '90s, and the special effects are really holding up. I mean, if you
yeah,
compare the special effects in Jurassic Park to the special effects, let's say in the '90s Star Wars films, they were so carefully placed and so carefully integrated in the whole thing that it still makes sense. Yeah.
yeah. No, so I mean, it's a wonderful film. I mean, at the end of the day, it is a wonderful monster film, and I mean, I love a good monster film. I think the sort of the real fascination with dinosaurs for me was it's something. I mean, I think even more primal than that, in that it's, if you really get down to it, dinosaurs existed on this same earth, but in a world very different than the world we're in. And I think if you think about sort of just, I mean, I think most humans we're fascinated by by the past, or like we'll sort of like look at history and think, oh, like what would it have been like to live and experience this other time. I mean, it's the human capacity for empathy. It's like, what would it like to be this other person? What would it be like to be this famous person? Or what would it be, what would it be like to meet or encounter, the Buddha or Jesus or, Caesar? And I think, dinosaurs and an interest in dinosaurs, that's just sort of a radical extension of that, where it's like, what would it be like to live on this earth, but with none of the prerequisites we think about? Like it's, the rules are completely different. Like there's none of the familiar life forms. Like the continents are different, the climate's different, but it's still the
I mean,
same
there weren't
planet.
even trees. I mean, that's the weirdest part. Like, can you
Yeah.
imagine a world without trees?
Well, they
Well,
were
the
tree
dinosaurs, there were different trees. I mean, they were
different
not.
tree. Yeah, yeah. Different. Well, and and flowers only at the very end. And
Yeah.
so it's just that sort of that exercise in what I will call radical empathy, or I guess sort of radical imagination, where you're thinking about, well, what is that like when, like, I mean, I'm sure there was wind blowing, but the wind was blowing through different plants. So what did that sound like? And bird song would have been very different. So what was what was in the background? It's that is from since childhood has been an endlessly romantic, fascinating thing for me. Um, so getting back to your original question about pop culture, there it's interesting. There actually, when I was growing up, there weren't that many dinosaur movies, period. I mean, there still aren't. But there definitely weren't many that were safe to show a small child. So my parents ended up showing me Godzilla movies because
Ah,
those were a few of the safe ones, and that this they little. little did they know the monster that they were going to create. Because it, I this will get into many other topics of conversation, but I mean, I Godzilla films were a portal into yet another different world. And I actually remember, I mean, I saw a lot of them just, kind of without thinking about it. But I do remember there was a moment, I think, again, I was probably about 7. And I realized, so I was seeing them when I was a child. They were dubbed, they were dubbed from Japanese into English. And I remember the day that I realized, oh, like the words don't quite line up with their mouths. And what that triggered then was a realization of, oh, like I've just sort of been watching this and engaging with this as if it is, a story about people with these imaginary things happening. But the world that these people are in, the landscape, the surroundings, it's different from the world around me. I mean, in kind of in my childish way, I thought, wait, this isn't America. Like the cars look different, the houses look different, and that, you know, it. I mean, it sounds kind of cute when you put it that way, but that's that's an important childhood revelation.
Yeah, but
And
it's true because I mean I remember, and I mean there's a difference, of course, between growing up in Europe and growing up in the US, because in the
yep,
US, a predominant part of pop culture is American pop culture. So even
yep,
like the
yep.
astonishing fact that there are dubbed movies, that there are movies in a different
Hmm.
language,
Hmm.
and Americans usually don't like that.
Yeah, no,
So like
no.
if you see like the non-lip synciness, for some people that's the trigger to just turn off. I'm not interested in that. In your case, it was triggering something, which is really interesting.
Well, once that did trigger, I could never watch a dub film again. Once I realized that I could watch in the original language with subtitles, like there was no going back, and
Yeah.
it is so. Um, but on the other hand, I'm grateful. I think I am grateful for that dubbing because it triggered something. And
It's
so
also
yeah,
like an interesting level of like a reflection about what media
yeah,
do to you and where they're coming from and what are the different cultural contexts and stuff like that. I mean, there's the story. I did a project a couple of years ago where, especially like everything in German, like if you go to a cinema, everything's dubbed. I mean,
yeah, yeah.
there are like too many German speakers, so the market is too big for pretty much like not everything being dubbed, which is
Hmm.
horrible for me. But I remember that like in the 1970s and 1980s, they even changed the content of films. I remember that there's this one episode of Columbo where
Mm,
Columbo tries to find out, someone gets killed. I guess the head of a circus or something like that. And in the German version, it is just like some kind of weird plot about blackmailing or something like that. And
mm.
in the original English version, when I found out, the whole thing is about a guy who was working in a concentration camp,
Oh shit!
and they just left out the concentration camp part. So the whole blackmail
Wow.
is not working anymore because there is no really imminent danger for that guy. It's just like a weird story about blackmailing. But if you know that the blackmailing story is about a guy who was working in a concentration camp, that's completely different. And they actually changed the content of films. The first time Casablanca actually came out in the German version, there are no Nazis in Casablanca.
Oh,
It's about nuclear scientists and stuff like that, like just like it was also
wow.
like dubbing, like changing through the dubbing the content of the film. And that was super fascinating for me, how that, like even the political dimension of that kind of cultural translation. But I mean,
Yeah.
we're digressing here. So
Oh well, no, no. I mean,
although there's a context between, or a connection
oh,
between, for example, the Godzilla films
oh,
that are
yeah,
heavily like politicized films, of course, or political films, because they deal with
yeah.
the first nuclear bombs.
No, I will steer into the digression before we get back. There's actually a notorious example of this. I mean, there's actually multiple examples of that same editing phenomena in the Godzilla series, but I think one of the most telling and interesting is so the 1980. So it's the 30th anniversary of Godzilla film made in 1984. So it's the the waning days of the Cold War, but when tensions were really high. And there's a scene in that film where there is a Soviet satellite that launches a nuclear missile at Japan. And in the original Japanese version, the cosmonaut who it like ends up launching the missile, like he dies. The way it's edited is that he dies heroically, trying to prevent the launch of the missile, but he's unable to. The
Okay.
US version, they re-edited it so that with his dying breath, he in fact does launch the missile. And
Yeah.
and I mean it's amazing because it's that is, I mean, that's completely 180 degrees swapped from the intent. But it reveals so much about what people thought audiences would want or need.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there are
Yeah.
so many stories like that. For example, in the German version of Die Hard,
Hmm.
uh, they are not German, the bad guys.
Yeah. Well,
They are
so
Dutch. Which is completely weird, but whatever.
yeah. Could is how So just anecdotally, when I went to when I went to a cinema here, I thought that the quality of the dubbing was excellent. Far better than just watching trailers for Hollywood films. I think part of it is that German and English are fairly close.
Yeah, and there's a long tradition, of course. I mean, there is a
Yeah,
whole industry, and they are super fast, of course, because sometimes there is between you like that from your own
yeah,
from your own project. Sometimes there's not that much time between the film that is finished and when the release starts, or when the
yeah,
first festival trailers come out, or something like that. So it has to be done super fast. And there are
yeah,
examples like The Simpsons. The Simpsons are actually pretty well dubbed, and some of the jokes don't really work because it's like too specific. But overall, I mean, translating humor is super difficult. And with The
yeah.
Simpsons, for example, it works pretty well in German. But I mean, there are also examples of like it's just like unwatchable. It's just like
So I
yeah.
mean, those major plot shifts like Columbo, how? I guess my question is, did something feel off without knowing what it was, and for how many people did it feel off? I guess my question is
I think
how,
for most people, I mean,
okay, yeah,
what I forgot, I mean, I didn't want to get into too much details about that,
yeah,
but the whole thing is like the guy who blackmails the guy who worked in the concentration camp. He is he's burning money in front of him and says like, give me more of that, or I will reveal what's going on. And he's burning
yeah,
the money. And without the context of the concentration camps, and you're like burning people and all this backstory,
hmm,
it's such a strange thing. Like, why would he burn paper and talk
yeah,
about some weird blackmail about something that he did in his company? So it doesn't make sense. But with this image of the burning money, of course, it makes a lot of sense. And it makes it way more threatening to, of course, the person who is being blackmailed because of his Nazi past.
yeah.
And yeah, stuff like that. But I mean, it's just like, I mean, I think we could go on and on for this for a long time.
Yeah, I guess if I before we circle back around to whatever the main topics are, I will say that like the fact that it feels off, like that gives me hope for the world. I mean, I think there are all kinds of people who try to censor things and try to clean things up, but I think humans inherently have the capacity to question things and overcome their brainwashing. So it gives me hope that it felt
Oh
off.
yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, so let's make a big jump. Let's make a big jump from your childhood days of being obsessed by dinosaurs and getting into Godzilla and being fascinated by Japanese culture. How did you end up going to Japan, and how did that, let's say, to also talk about your projects, your films that you're making,
yeah.
how did that influence the films that you made?
Yeah, no, I mean it's again. I mean it goes back to dinosaurs. Up until the age of 12, I was going to be a paleontologist, and I was very, I think I was very much on that path. And then at the age of 12, I decided, with that very sort of precocious 12-year-old mindset, oh no, I'm going to be a film director instead, and I wrote my first screenplay when I was 13, and I just kind of, I started making movies. I started figuring things out, but it actually went one step beyond that. In that, I by that point I had really invested in Japanese films. I mean, there were a whole lot of giant monster films that were not officially available in the US, so I was getting pirated versions, and I was, on the early internet, I was looking up information there, and it felt like, it felt like this whole sort of like exotic hidden world that I was discovering. It's a bit like a treasure hunt. And it was something that, no one in my circle was interested in, and I was so passionate about it. I basically, again, I decided, like, well, I want to do one of those. So what do I need to do to do that? And it became obvious to me. It's like, well, okay, I need to learn how to do filmmaking, and I need to learn Japanese. And so it's interesting because I think, that ambition, I mean, or I think around the age of 12, it kind of emerged fully formed, like, oh, I'm going to make a Godzilla film one day, and not even in an aspirational sort of way, like, no, I am going to do this. So, statement of fact. So what do I need to do this? And, again, I think, a lot of the adults in my life are like, oh, that's nice, but, it's like you'll probably end up like discovering some other interest or doing something else. And
Never
but
underestimate the craziness of kids. Never
I mean,
underestimate it.
it's, or maybe the fact that it was underestimated is why I've been so damn stubborn,
Yeah.
and kept at it. But it really, it just kind of, that ambition just kind of stuck. And so in some ways it was a dual ambition, because it was learn Japanese and like really learn Japanese, and learn filmmaking, and really learn filmmaking. And I think outside looking in, it may have seemed like I was kind of pursuing these different tracks, and that maybe there was going to be some sort of choice that had to be made. And in my mind, that was never the case. It was more, these are these intertwined passions. So how do I balance them out? And I think, they're interconnected in that, like, the deeper interest is storytelling. I mean, I was one of those little boys who, I would draw pictures and tell little stories. And, when I was able to write, I'd start writing them down. And so, I mean, I think that's just the deeper, that's the deeper root of all of this, is just some of us, are born with the desire to tell stories. And this was my particular path that I chose. So, I didn't really have the ability to study Japanese in any kind of organized way, like up through high school. So, I'd watch a lot of films, and I'd read, and I'd try to pick up things where I could. But it was kind of an unfulfilled goal. Now, I did a lot of filmmaking. I mean, I did my first feature film when I was 19, and it's now up on YouTube. Of course, it has the technical limitations of a film that a bunch of high schoolers make, but it has a heck of a lot of passion in it, which I'm awfully proud of.
Can you still watch it?
You can.
Or are you, I mean, yeah, I know, because I mean, we'll put it all in the information down
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
But if you watch it yourself,
Oh,
like
me.
what are your feelings when you watch the film that you made when you were
Oh,
19?
this speaks to a longer issue. Oh, no, I love watching it. And I've never. This actually speaks to a larger philosophical thing. Is I made a sort of a deal with myself long ago. I don't want to become one of those people who hates or is uncomfortable watching his own work. It's like you have to. I feel like if I need to do things that I'm proud of, and I think also, like, this is not to say that I think that everything I do is, I recognize the imperfections and the flaws in my own work, and I certainly, I'm the first to want to do better, to do a lot better. But like it's something that, but part of it is, I see it and I remember what went into it, and it's like a time capsule of who I and my friends were at that age. Um, Part of it is, I mean, I do think it was not an easy thing to do, and I think the sort of the passion and the gumption of these kids making a film, I think it shows. So, yeah, I mean, I think I enjoy watching it and sort of appreciating the warts, appreciating the triumphs. Like that's all part of That's all part of it. You know, it's a different experience from watching a film that someone else made. Um, you know, because it is an emotional roller coaster. But I guess I enjoy going on the roller coaster. I mean, it helps me reflect on where I came from and where I'm going, and I think you know, it's a way of it it reignites the ambitions.
Yeah.
Um,
What I like about, of course, I mean, watching all the stuff, there is always this like strange cognitive dissonance of like seeing
yeah,
something that you did yourself,
yeah,
uh, and it's crazy for me because, and the only thing, the only glimpse I get about that kind of feeling from other filmmakers is usually commentary tracks on DVDs or something
yeah,
like that. So when you
yeah,
have people talk about their work while watching the work, uh, and but it's almost like having your own commentary track in your head because you remember when you did that. You remember all the
yeah,
stories. You remember all the things that went wrong. And of
yeah.
course, nobody else knows that. Nobody else has the perspective of
Hmm.
making
Hmm.
it and seeing the final product. And that
Yeah,
is always kind of weird. But I have to say, like, I enjoyed a lot with other filmmakers
yeah,
and hearing them tell their stories about how things got made.
yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, I think this. We were actually talking about this the other night, but you know that I made several films in high school, but the feature in particular, it it really like that was where I learned some of the most important lessons about filmmaking that I still apply. And now the craft of filmmaking, like there was so much I still had to learn, obviously, you know, and that's where it's like more practice, more film school, like more just like life experience came in. But I think, I mean, one of the real fundamental lessons to getting a film made and making it good, I did learn in high school, and it's a pretty simple fact when you think about it. But it's that, you know, films are entropy machines. It's like if you get a bunch of people together to do a complicated thing, like with a lot of variables, things are going to go wrong, and like there are going to be giant problems, and you have to accept the giant problems as a given and find ways to turn them to your advantage. And so, I mean, I've sort of codified this into a personal mantra that every problem is an opportunity. You know, and that sounds like a cutesy little saying, but I think it is a necessary skill if you want to make good art, because particularly if you're making art with a lot of people, there will be problems. There will be big problems, and you have to not be surprised when the problems come, and always look for the opportunity. Always look for the chance to make the film better because of the problem. And that's
Yeah.
something I learned when I was dealing with high school classmates who, you know, were pulling all kinds of crazy shenanigans because of their raging hormones and unreliability, and and just normal
Okay.
teenage stuff.
Like filmmaking is problem solving. I
Yeah,
completely agree with that. It's not only problem solving, it's problem solving, and you're dependent on other people.
yeah,
So
yeah,
it's like you have to solve like all this like the worst thing about filmmaking is the micromanaging part, because at some point, because especially as filmmakers or as auteur filmmakers, let's call it, there's certain things that are hard to delegate. You know, like
yeah.
you kind of have to do them yourself, but you're not capable of doing all this stuff yourself because I'm
Hmm.
not good in like special effects stuff. So I depend on people who do special effects. But
Yeah,
it's just like it's weird to wrangle all these ghosts in your
yeah,
head, I guess. But
yeah.
let's go. Let's jump ahead a couple of
Yes.
years from your first feature film when you were 19, and let's compare that film to the film you just released and had world premiere at Fantastic Fest. It's called EK Boys. And
Yeah.
of course, a lot of things happen in between. You lived 10 years in Japan and all that stuff. But if there is something that you could say that is possible to compare those two films, what would that be?
Yeah, well, I think one is actually sort of right there on the surface, which is that EK Boys is semi-autobiographical. It's about a couple of best friends in Oklahoma, and their interests and their and their friendship and those they are in many ways fictionalized versions of the real people who made my high school movie. The lead character in Ike Boys is a fictionalized version of me, and his best friend is a fictionalized version of my best friend, who's the star of the high school feature. Um, and
Okay, okay.
I'm trying to think. I don't think there are any of the same filming locations, which is interesting. Um, but the school that we were at when we made the movie in high school, we shot big sections of Ike Boys there. So so there's definitely a connection. Now, this is where I have to clarify and say semi-autobiographical, in the classic sense. There's huge doses of fiction in Ike
Oh
Boys.
yeah, aren't there like 500 special effect shots or something like that?
Oh yeah, well, I mean, even before you get into the fantastical stuff, there's a liberal dose of fiction in the human characters, but yes,
Okay,
but yeah,
tell us a little bit about the plot line without giving away too much. I'm not sure how much
yeah.
you want to spoil.
Oh yeah, well, yeah, this is always tricky for me because I don't mind spoilers. I mean, I think it's about the journey, not the destination. But yeah. So Ike Boys, it's about a couple of best friends in Oklahoma in the year 1999, and they're nerdy. They're sort of bored and living this small town life. And their escape from small town Oklahoma high school life is all things Japanese. So anime, giant monster films, and at the end of the so it's the end of the year 1999, and there is a Japanese exchange student, a girl, coming to spend the holidays with one of the boys. And in their attempts to impress her, they track down this mysterious, long lost anime film that is supposed to be a prophecy about the year 1999 and the heroes who will rise to save the world. So the boys and Miki, the exchange student, they watch this cursed anime, and it uh, casts a spell over them, and they start transforming into Japanese heroes. And so they have to come together and save the day before the clock strikes midnight and the year turns to 2000. So it's big, colorful, multicultural. I think probably the biggest compliment that I got was I had a friend who said that this is the film that John Hughes would have made if he'd grown up obsessed with Japanese culture.
Oh,
So
that's a huge compliment.
yeah, yeah, and that's very much that's very much the spirit of it. It's a big, sweet, sincere, funny American high school movie with a giant dose of Japanese influence. And
Is there like, because I'm super fascinated, because like it was also a big part of my youth and life-changing things going on, but the change from 1999 to 2000, so the new millennium is arriving and all that
yeah,
stuff. In your case, is this also kind of like a symbol for kind of like the end of like going into adulthood or something like that? Or is this because in my case, I mean, I was born 75, so
yeah,
I was like a little bit older, of course,
yeah, yeah,
and I was definitely way out of being a teen when the
yeah.
2000 change happened. But it failed really. It felt really as something like significant had happened, and at the same time, it was just like another day.
Yeah, no, well, I think you just said it. The fact that it felt like something significant had happened and yet nothing really changed. I mean, that's at the heart of it. And it definitely is. There's so much. So Ike Boys at its heart, it really is a film about growing up. And if there's a message of the film, it's that, you know, growing up is kind of an illusion. You don't actually grow up. Who you are as a child informs who you are as an adult. And and the message of the film is is be yourself, because there's no sort of big secret waiting for you when you reach adulthood. It's you already know all the secrets. It's just all of the things that drive you as a child should be the things that drive you as an adult. It's a very sweet, sincere, feel good message, but one that I actually believe. Um, and So yeah, I mean, it's so the fact that the kids transform into monsters, the fact that at the change of the millennium, there's all it's all symbolic. I mean, it's all about growing up and change, and the fact that big things seem like they're changing, but they actually aren't. And
Mhm.
and one thing I'll say specific is, so you know, there were so many rumors and so much fear and fascination with the idea that the world might be about to end.
Yeah,
And
yeah, of course. Yeah. I mean,
um,
yeah, like I read there was this book by Charles Berlitz from the 1980s, not sure what the English title was, but the German title was Weltuntergang 1999, which means
yeah,
like End of the World 1999. And I
yeah,
read that when I was like 10 or something like that. So there
yeah,
was
yeah,
like a strange, this like nine. I remember that my grandfather, he had one of these date stamps for
yeah.
letters,
Hmm.
and the date stamp ended in 1999.
Yeah, yeah.
So there were a couple of things that for me made this like really like there is some major thing going on. And then of course the whole debate about the Y2K bug and all like the real
Well,
stuff that almost went wrong.
yeah, but I mean, it's a deep, fascinating topic. So of course, I didn't know it at the time, but what I later found out, making friends in Japan, is that Japan, there was a national obsession with the prophecies of Nostradamus,
Ah,
which and it's the weirdest thing, because it's like, why in Japan, why in this, this basically, atheistic country, where these kind of, biblical apocalyptic prophecies, arguably more, they were more in the cultural ether than the Y2K bug was.
mhm.
But it was just like there was very much this obsession that this big global calamity was about to happen. So now, I don't believe in making topical films. I believe in making things that will be timeless and relevant long after they're made. I mean, at least that is my goal, and I think that produces better work. Obviously, I'm making this film in, we started filming it in 2020. Premiere was last year. It'll be coming out. It'll be coming out this autumn. So there's a lot of apocalyptic concerns in the world right now. And I think in some modest way, my hope with this film is to maybe just send a reassuring message to people and say, well, we thought the world was going to end before, but you know, basic human decency and basic human kindness got us through. It got us through 1999 and 2000. So I think it'll get us through the issues we're dealing with now.
Yeah, absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. I mean, we're both very optimistic people because otherwise we wouldn't be artists, I guess,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
to do
Yeah.
something, or like even thinking about the future. Like if you say you want to make a film that is still relevant in 20 years, you have to have in mind that there is still a world in 20 years.
Yeah.
you
Well,
know
and
yeah.
this is so. This is something I think about a lot. Is I I I view optimism as it's a verb, not a noun. It's like it's a discipline, not a state. It's because like optimism doesn't mean, at least for me, it doesn't mean not thinking that bad things are going to happen, perhaps very bad things, but it's believing that there's the possibility of solutions and the possibility of good outcomes. So it's like I view it as a compass sort of guiding my actions, because it's like, okay, like there's going to be problems, but there's also the possibility of solutions, and there's the possibility of of things working out. So day to day, how can I navigate the world to head towards that better outcome? um, and I think history is proof that if enough people do that, uh, we muddle along.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, I'm like if I'm in my more pessimistic mode, let's call it,
yeah,
and of course that happens every now and then,
yeah,
especially like during pandemics and stuff like that.
yeah,
But
yeah.
I mean, I kind of have the feeling of like there is probably not an end of the world, but there is this like never-ending decline, which is
Yeah,
also kind of like. But I mean, the cool thing about that decline is that it. It's nothing that like nothing abruptly changes like
yeah.
everything has like a like a it's a curve and the curve can probably be bent up again or adjusted
It, it's so interesting hearing you say that. And we're maybe getting far afield from filmmaking here, but I don't actually think so. And I had a long conversation with a friend back in Japan, right in the height of the pandemic, and we had this discussion of, is the world, looking at history, looking at what the world's at right now, is the world getting better? Is the world getting worse? Or is the world just kind of, is it always plateauing? I think my take is that the amount of good and evil in the world is kind of constant. They're just shifting and moving around.
That sounds
And
very much like Asian philosophy to me.
yeah. Well, my friend said Kurt Vonnegut. But yeah, I mean, I think it. Yeah, I mean, it's a very Buddhist way of looking at the world, and I think, I mean, because at the heart of Buddhism, it's the idea that pain doesn't go away; it just transforms. And I don't know. I mean, I think as with many things, there is some truth. Like, I think there's some truth to all of the different ways of looking at the world. I think at the one hand, there like the sort of the plateau theory is true, but also, I mean, consider the fact that here we're having a video call, and we're able to connect, across countries, across, just across, just, this, I think, just the simple fact of this video is a sign of the world getting better. The level of the problems we're dealing with is also a sign of the world getting worse. So
Yeah.
I think,
And it's also it's a perspective, like it's also like how you look at things. So for example, there's this old story that that I think I can't even remember who made it up, but the thing was that someone realized, oh wow, fuck, there's Wi-Fi on airplanes. This is just like the best thing ever. Now I can sit in an airplane and work on the internet. I don't have to be like cut off the world for 5 hours or something like that flying. Yeah. And 5 minutes later, he realizes that the Wi-Fi is not working, and he complains about the wonder. Why is it not working? And there's just like this 5 minute slot between endless awe and wonder and possibility, and the consumer complaint that it's not working.
Yeah. I mean, that's so true. I mean, you're talking about the sort of shifting perspective and shifting in how you look at things. I mean, one of the things that got me through the pandemic was, near my apartment there was a group of friendly cats, and I had a walking route where I'd walk through the neighborhood to clear my head, and the cats kind of learned that, like, when I walked by, if they ran up to me, I would play with them, and of course, cats are smarter than us, so they learned, like, oh, like, if we run up, he will stop and be with us as long as we want. So I ended up, I spent a lot of time just, sitting, kind of hanging out and petting these cats. And part of the interesting thing about this is all of these cats had owners. They were just, they were indoor, outdoor cats. They were very well taken care of. So there was nothing transactional about the relationship. It was very much a friendship across species lines. And so it occurred to me one day, I mean, I was sitting, watching the sunset with a cat, and it occurred to me, this cat is seeing the same sunset that I am, but from a completely different perspective, and is viewing the world in a completely different way than me. And I think we as humans, we think that our viewpoint is superior, and it just kind of hit me in that moment that I don't think that's necessarily true at all. I think there's so much in the world that we're not aware of. And it was a real moment of clarity for me. And again, it's like, it seems like an obvious thing when you think about it. It's like, of course, but like, that cat has a different view of the world. Like the tree I was leaning against, that has a different view of the world. It's like, I think one of our gifts as humans is the sort of the imagination to try to think beyond ourselves. But like, if you push it just enough, you realize, like, all of the things that like we're not aware of. Like, there's so many aspects to the universe that just we can't touch. Like, they're not, they're not something that we can comprehend. And yeah, I guess I find that thought, you know, maybe it's a little bit scary, but I find it rather comforting. There's
Yeah.
just
If you see it in a positive way, it's comforting. If you see it in like in the perspective from an artist it's that's the job we have to do. That is what the universe wants of us, to present different perspectives, to present different universes and worldviews. And that's kind of exhausting sometimes.
yeah, well, no, yeah, I mean, it sure is. I mean, I think it's a, you know, and it's exhausting, and to a degree, it's a failing enterprise, but like, or I would say an enterprise doomed to fail, because you can never, like, you can never actually fully do it. But I think, like, in striving to do it, I don't know, you can create something really special. I mean, what is it Roger Ebert said? That movies are machines for generating empathy.
Yeah,
And so,
emotional machines. Yes,
yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I forget where we got on this from, but
like, I mean, I don't even know where we started, but I mean,
no. But these are things that I think about a lot, and I mean, I was supposed getting it back to EK Boys. It's very much at the heart of EK Boys, because EK Boys is about you know, people from different cultures trying to connect and trying to appreciate one another. And they get a lot of things wrong. I mean, when you see the film, there's, you know, there's a lot of humor in the film based off of cultural misunderstandings. But the really key thing is, like, everyone involved is trying, and everyone is trying to understand and connect and, like, and be empathetic. And even if they, like, make mistakes along the way, the fact that they're trying is what counts, and is what ultimately saves the world. So,
of course, highly recommended. So whenever you out there have a chance to watch EK Boys, please do so. So you mentioned already that it will be hopefully in wider distribution in August 2020.
So more like possibly more likely the autumn. So like I'm there's certain there's certain things that I'm not able to say just yet, and also certain things we're still working on. But you know, it's a holiday film, and I'll just, like, an autumn release is looking likely. I think both domestic and international. The way I think, I don't know about exactly the same time, but I think autumn of 2022 is, I think, going to be when it happens. So
wonderful. So I have just like one last question for you. Is, can you tell us anything about the new project that you're working on? Because that was part of your artist residency here at Museums Court as well. You're working on another script. Is there at least a little bit you can tell us?
Yeah, no, it's well, I'm not trying to be cute or bring the conversation full circle at all, but I've long believed that there's a great film about dinosaurs to be made that is completely different from anything that's been made before, and that's what I've been working on. It's my dinosaurs opus, and yeah, and it actually it is an opus. It has dinosaurs in it, but it's a big, grand adventure, and it actually touches on a lot of the things that we've been discussing in this conversation, because it's the sort of the central question it asks at the heart of it is, what does it mean to be human? And it answers that in a big,
through dinosaurs,
big grand story with dinosaurs. So Jurassic Park, it ain't. As much as I like Jurassic Park, it's something I can confidently say that nothing else like it has been done before, and that's why I'm so excited.
That sounds great. Wonderful. So maybe one last question. Not a question, actually. Maybe could you tell our B3 listeners, guests, observers, maybe like a greeting in Japanese?
Oh, yeah. Well, let's see here. そうですね。今回、オーストリア全体も初めてですけど、ウィーンは初めてで、 で、よくいろんな人に、ウィンはどうですかと聞かれてきたんですけど、いつも聞かれるとき、多分その裏目標としては、本当にウィン好きなのと聞かれてるような気がして、多分ウィンに住んでる人たちはそこまでウィンが好きじゃない気がするんだけれども、本当僕にとってもう最高の経験になってますよ。よくアメリカでも多分日本もそうだけど、ウィンは、一つ、もう西洋の文化が誕生した街で、本当に今の僕にとって、本当最高のインスピレーションになってます。ベートーベン、モーツァルトが踏んだ道を踏んで、彼らは何を考えながらこの道を踏んだのかなと思いつつ、自分も、モーツァルトに比べると、それはちょっと過言ですけど、どう考えても自信過剰ですけど、自分も頑張れば、この街のエネルギーでいいものを作れると、すごい実感してきました。で、あと、食べ物も飲み物も最高でした。とにかく大感謝です。ありがとうございました。Sorry, I went on. That was probably too much. I just like if there's anyone out there who understood Japanese, I gave them a long and philosophical response about how much I appreciate being here. So
thank you so much. It was a wonderful conversation. Great to have you on the show. We will all keep checking out online what you're up to and what's happening in your artistic future.
Yeah, to quote Frank Sinatra, the best is yet to come.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you for having me. Bye-bye.
Hey, folks, and dear ladies and gentlemen of whatever gender you prefer, that was another episode of B3 In Depth. If you want to see future episodes, please subscribe somewhere down here. I hope to see you in the future, and I hope you join the debate. Thanks.